So I ended up just doing this voiceover thing because I wrote a lot of notes for this. I didn't want a wall of text on the screen popping up, so I'm just gonna talk. These are some panels I made one night, along with some vents and HVAC units, greebling details to greeble onto more greebling, and some TVs as well. I did not record these because I just make these. I try to make little assets like these as warm-up sketches or practice. And this payphone. I gave this model a little extra love with a simple rig. And as a test for the grease pencil effect, I start a new file and bring things in via the append option. Taking time to label everything in projects and set them up in collections helps with moving assets around and not losing things. Housekeeping. Ended up having to make more simple little panels to fill things out, give it some variation. I use the array tool to quickly lay out panels. This has a few benefits, being they're not real, and so they can be hidden to save on resources. I use this function a lot more with the bottles coming up in the video. Adding some variations to some of the machines that I reuse so they don't all look the same. Just tweaking the nodes and stuff. My sketch for this illustration, I'll overlay it and then refine things in Blender with grease pencil, and then move the camera and the characters around until I find something I like. Oh look, I added another guy. I didn't like the TVs just laying there, so I needed to give them purpose. I built this cart for the TVs, just to place them in it and, move it around the scene. I fixed up this old iBot model for this. He was featured in my original video featuring me. I brought him and this Monty model in for some posing just to help with the drawing reference later. Adding pipes and cables, just drawing them in sometimes and moving them around, because tubes just make things look cool and futuristic. Blender crashed at some point and didn't open all my texture files. It's strange. Start to work with the compositor nodes to find like a mood. I kind of just come back to this later. Here I am building a shell for collisions. Instead of adding colliders to everything in this setting, I'm just making a mesh piece to go over it. Running the physics a few times, tweaking, moving things around, and setting the transformation for locations on bottles as I go, and then moving them a little. I go back in and remove some and move them some more and check how they look in the camera. This is where things get interesting. I use Blender to generate most of the lines. I can tell Blender that places on the mesh that are marked with sharp get lines. This is something I think about when I'm making my models. Now this is cool. I'm just drawing the lines onto the surface of the mesh. These lines work slightly different than the ones I made Blender generate. They're still cool. They make all these details just pop. Digging into the compositor nodes after setting this all up, I ended up cutting the video here as it was a couple hours of just doing test renders, tweaking the shaders and the compositors, doing more renders, and OBS wasn't playing. It took a while. So the lines generated by Blender are set to what the camera would see. If you remove all the mesh, you can see how these lines are wrapped around in 3D space. I think it's pretty neat. A rundown of the shader nodes. That guy wasn't doing anything. The floor and most texture details are just a noise texture. Ran through a color ramp and then stuck into a basic metal shader. I use a lot of masking here. I have the basic texture with a noise texture running through two color ramps. One is a black and white that I use as a mask, and the other is a duplicate, which is colors to get some rust texture. And then I'll use the black and white one to mask away this color to give it kind of a variation in the roughness and glossiness. The emissions is set up with a gradient texture for the colors and then masked away. I forgot I could just color the texture files. Last is the glass material using two nodes and then masked away. The neon lights are just two emission shaders using a fentanyl shader to mix the two. Fentanyl kind of makes a thicker inside line depending on the camera angle and just gives a nice neon look. And the compositor node setup. I did this the old way where you have to set up the layers you want to render out, with the lines being on their own layer. And mix that on top of the image without the lines. New Blender just has a grease pencil option, its own fucking thing. You just pull it right out, and I missed that when I was working on this. I use the hue, saturation, contrast nodes to push things back, make it not look as glossy in 3D. The glare node pulls out the highlights, and I overlay the lines on top like you would a drawing. I ended up spending a little extra time on this to show off the background and did a little animation with my iBot just running through the scene so we can all enjoy the detail just a little more.